A high-value man doesn't break. He bends, he adapts, he feels the weight of the world press against his shoulders, but he doesn't snap. You see, there's a core inside him, something unshakable, forged in struggle, fire-tested and storm-approved. It's not that life doesn't come for him, it does. Life shows no favoritism. It punches hard, and it punches often. But what separates the man of worth from the man of weakness is not whether the blow lands, it's how he stands back up. He understands that adversity is not his enemy, it's his training ground. He sees what most people miss, that pressure has a purpose. Every trial is an opportunity. Every heartbreak, every failure, every delay is part of the shaping. He doesn't run from the fire because he knows that gold is purified in the flames. A high-value man doesn't just survive the heat. He lets the heat make him. That's why he doesn't break. Because his character isn't built in comfort. It's built in the crucible of hard seasons. He doesn't complain, he doesn't beg, he doesn't fall to pieces when things don't go his way. Why? Because his peace doesn't come from circumstances, it comes from clarity. He's not driven by chaos around him, he's anchored by the vision within him. You put that man in the middle of a storm, and he'll still move with precision. You try to shake him with fear, and he'll respond with focus, because he's trained, he's disciplined, he's got a mission, and nothing is going to pull him off course. You ever seen a man walk with quiet confidence, not arrogance, confidence, that kind of stillness that speaks louder than shouting ever could? He's not loud because he doesn't need to be, he's not performing. He doesn't need attention to feel valuable. He doesn't need applause to know he's worthy. He knows who he is, and that knowledge radiates in every step, every decision, every moment. You can't buy that kind of presence. You can't fake it. It comes from doing the work when nobody's watching. That man wakes up early, even when he's tired. He disciplines himself, even when nobody will call him out. He trains his mind when others are numbing theirs. He chooses growth over comfort, purpose over popularity, legacy over convenience. And when life hits him, when the weight feels unbearable, when people walk away and things fall apart, he doesn't crack. He adjusts, he recalibrates, and he keeps moving forward. A high-value man is not controlled by emotion. He feels yes, he feels deeply, but he is not ruled by those feelings. He doesn't make permanent decisions based on temporary storms. He's not reactive. He's reflective, he processes, he evaluates, and then he chooses wisely. His strength isn't in how loud he gets, it's in how still he can remain in the face of chaos. He's the eye of the hurricane. Everything around him might be spinning, but inside there's clarity, there's peace, there's resolve. He knows the value of delayed gratification. He understands that everything meaningful takes time. He doesn't chase shortcuts. He doesn't try to cheat the process. He embraces the grind. He finds power in routine. He's consistent when others are inconsistent. He's loyal when others flake. He's focused when others are distracted. Because he's not chasing a high. He's building a foundation. And he knows that building something that lasts requires patience, pain, and persistence. That's why he doesn't entertain every opportunity. He's selective, not because he's arrogant, but because he knows his time is valuable. He knows that what he gives his energy to grows, and so he guards his focus. He protects his peace. He doesn't waste hours trying to convince people of his worth. He doesn't lower his standards to fit into rooms he's outgrown. He's not afraid to walk alone, because he understands that solitude sharpens strength. The crowd doesn't define him, his calling does, and that calling requires standards. High ones, not just in how he dresses or how he speaks, but in how he lives, in how he treats others, in how he handles conflict, in how he carries responsibility. He's not perfect, but he's principled. He's not flawless, but he's faithful, and he doesn't compromise, not when it comes to his values, not when it comes to his integrity, because he knows that compromise in character always costs more than it pays. You won't see him making a scene when things don't go his way. You won't see him blame others or point fingers. He takes responsibility. That's what separates the boys from the men. A high-value man owns his mistakes. He learns from them. He lets failure refine him, not define him. He doesn't play the victim. He plays the victor because he knows that what he chooses to believe shapes what he becomes. People may try to misunderstand him. They may question his motives, doubt his moves, mock his pace, but he doesn't flinch because he's not performing for them. He's building something deeper, and deep work doesn't need explanation. It needs execution. So he lets his results speak. He lets his progress whisper what his pride never needs to shout. And over time, people begin to notice, not because he demanded attention, but because he lived with intention. There's a discipline in him that doesn't waver with seasons. He shows up whether it's raining or sunny, whether people are cheering or jeering, whether the wins are public or private, because he's not doing it for applause. He's doing it for alignment. He's aligning himself with his calling, with his creator, with the purpose that burns inside him. And when you're walking in purpose, pain doesn't derail you, it deepens you. He knows how to be gentle without being weak, strong without being harsh, bold without being reckless. He's mastered the balance between compassion and courage. He listens before he speaks. He seeks to understand before he acts. And when he speaks, people lean in, not because he's loud, but because he's wise. Because his words are rooted in experience, because his speech is backed by action. You want to test the weight of a man. Don't watch him when he's winning. Watch him when he's wounded. Watch how he carries disappointment. Watch how he treats others when no one's watching. Watch how he stands when the platform is gone, when the money is tight, when the relationships are strained. That's where value is revealed. That's where the real ones are separated from the imposters. The high-value man doesn't break under pressure because pressure is where he thrives. He sees it as the invitation to become more, not the excuse to give up. He doesn't let delay kill his dream. He doesn't let rejection distort his identity. He doesn't let failure rob him of faith. He moves forward even if it's slow. He moves forward even if it's uphill. He moves forward because he knows that destiny is reserved for the man who refuses to quit. He doesn't compare himself. He's not in competition with other men. He competes with the man he was yesterday. He's not looking sideways. He's looking forward. Every day he's striving, stretching, sharpening. Not to impress others, but to honor the calling, to steward the gift, to reach the standard he knows he was born for. And he uplifts others. A high-value man isn't threatened by someone else's strength. He celebrates it. He affirms it. He builds people up because he's secure in his own identity. He doesn't have to dim someone else's light to shine. In fact, he shines brighter by helping others find their glow. That's legacy, that's impact, that's leadership. When chaos comes, he's the one people look to. When things fall apart, he's the one who holds it together, not because he has all the answers, but because he has the strength to stay grounded. He's the man who brings order to confusion, direction to doubt, courage to fear, not because he never feels weak, but because he chooses to be strong anyway. It's not easy, it's not flashy, but it's real. That's what makes him rare. He's the kind of man who doesn't just change rooms. He changes atmospheres. He doesn't just influence people. He inspires them because when you see how he moves, how he responds, how he lives, you're reminded of what's possible. You're reminded that real strength isn't found in muscles, money, or noise. It's found in stillness, in faith, in grit, in character, and so, When life throws the punch, when betrayal hits hard, when the weight gets heavy, when the storm won't stop, he doesn't collapse. He doesn't complain, he doesn't break, he might fall to his knees, but even from there he rises again and again and again, because breaking is not an option, quitting is not a language he speaks. He doesn't wait for easy, he doesn't pray for escape, he prays for endurance, he builds for legacy, he walks with purpose, and that's why no matter how hard it gets, he doesn't break. A high-value man doesn't break because he understands that breaking is not in his nature. It's not how he was built, and it's not how he's going to live. He's wired differently. He doesn't collapse in the middle of crisis. He centers himself. When the world spins out of control, when people lose their minds, when panic becomes the default response, he becomes even more composed because he's not living according to emotions. He's living according to principle. He made decisions long before the chaos showed up. He built convictions in seasons of peace so he could hold his ground in seasons of pressure. That's why he doesn't break, because he prepared for this. Preparation is what separates a man who lasts from a man who fades. The high-value man doesn't wait for the storm to figure out who he is. He defines that in advance. He's already decided what he will and will not compromise. He's already laid the groundwork for how he'll respond to betrayal, loss, pain, and confusion. So when those moments come, and they always come, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't need a pep talk or a panic room. He knows his purpose. He knows his anchor. He knows that his identity is not up for negotiation just because life got hard. This kind of man walks with power not because he's never been broken, but because he's learned how to rebuild. He's been hurt, but he healed. He's been lied to, but he kept telling the truth. He's been overlooked, but he never stopped working. He's been betrayed, but he kept his loyalty. That's power. That's value. That's rare, and it doesn't come from charm or charisma. It comes from choosing character again and again, even when it would be easier to give up. The man who doesn't break also knows how to set boundaries. He's not available to everything. He doesn't say yes to every request. He's not accessible to drama, distraction, or disorder. His time is sacred. His energy is guarded. He knows that to fulfill his assignment, he has to protect his alignment. That means he walks away from what drains him. He releases what doesn't serve him. He refuses to engage with what lowers his standard, not because he's proud, but because he's focused. You can't pull a high-value man into chaos because he's rooted in discipline. He doesn't argue with fools. He doesn't chase clout. He doesn't spend time proving himself to people who already made up their minds. He's not playing games. He's building greatness, and that means his silence sometimes speaks louder than words. His restraint is a weapon. His peace is a position of power, and he doesn't allow temporary situations to alter his eternal mindset. He's consistent. That's the secret weapon. When others are up and down, in and out, hot and cold, he remains steady. He doesn't let emotions override his mission. He doesn't let opinions distract from his objective. He shows up every day, whether it feels good or not, whether people see it or not. He shows up because he's not doing it for a moment. He's doing it for a legacy. He's not living for likes. He's living for impact, for purpose, for destiny, and he knows that destiny demands discipline. He understands that greatness costs something. He's willing to pay that price. He doesn't resent the responsibility. He respects it because he knows that what he builds now will outlive him. His name will echo in the choices he made when no one was clapping. That's why he doesn't cut corners. He doesn't skip steps. He doesn't take the easy road. He embraces the hard way because the hard way shapes him. It strengthens his character, sharpens his vision, and solidifies his foundation. A high-value man doesn't blame the world when things go wrong. He looks inward, he reflects, he reevaluates, he recalibrates, he takes ownership because he knows that pointing fingers is a waste of power. He doesn't spend time explaining why he failed. He spends time learning from it. He lets failure become his instructor, not his identity. That's why he evolves. That's why he levels up. That's why people can look at his life and see transformation. Not perfection, but growth, maturity, wisdom. He doesn't define himself by his past. He respects his past, learns from it, but he refuses to live there. He refuses to let yesterday become a prison. He's too focused on what's ahead, and what's ahead is shaped by how he shows up today. So he pours himself into this moment. He gives his best here and now, because he knows that you don't get to your future by wishing. You get there by working. Every step, every choice, every sacrifice is an investment in what's coming. And that future, it's worth the cost. That's why he refuses to break under pressure, because he understands that pressure is the proof of potential. Diamonds don't form in comfort. Champions aren't born in convenience. You don't become valuable by avoiding difficulty. You become valuable by overcoming it. And the high-value man doesn't just endure. He excels. He thrives in the fire. He multiplies in the desert. He rises in the storm. Because pressure reveals what's inside. And what's inside him: strength, faith, vision, unshakable purpose. He doesn't let failure steal his focus. When doors close, he doesn't collapse. He creates new doors. When people doubt him, he doesn't retaliate. He refines his craft. When the applause fades, he doesn't shrink. He keeps building because he's not building for fans. He's building for fulfillment. He's not motivated by praise. He's driven by purpose. And that purpose keeps him steady, keeps him humble, keeps him climbing when the summit still feels far away. And even in the climb, even in the waiting, even in the hidden seasons, he keeps doing the work. Quietly, diligently, faithfully, because he knows something most people forget. What you do in the dark determines how you shine in the light. He understands that excellence is formed in private, that mastery is birthed in obscurity. That greatness begins where nobody sees and nobody claps. And because he's willing to go through that process, he emerges not just strong, but unstoppable. The high-value man also knows how to manage his emotions. He doesn't suppress them, but he doesn't let them rule him either. He gives space for grief, but he doesn't live in despair. He acknowledges anger, but he doesn't become destructive. He lets pain inform him, not control him. That's maturity. That's emotional intelligence. That's strength. Because a man who can master himself can handle anything life throws at him. And in relationships, he doesn't manipulate. He doesn't dominate. He leads with love. He leads with service. He leads with responsibility. He doesn't use people to feel powerful. He empowers people through how he loves, how he listens, how he protects, how he shows up. He brings stability, not chaos. He brings healing, not harm, because he understands the weight of his presence. He knows the ripple effect of his words, his actions, his choices, so he chooses wisely. He doesn't entertain what threatens his peace. He doesn't flirt with compromise. He doesn't settle for less than what aligns with his vision. He's not desperate. He's decisive. He's not swayed by pressure. He's strengthened by it. And when things get tough, when the ground shakes, when the silence screams, he doesn't beg for rescue. He becomes the answer. He becomes the leader. He becomes the anchor. And if he falls, he rises with dignity. He owns the mistake. He makes it right. He learns the lesson. He adjusts the strategy, and he moves forward, not with shame, but with wisdom, not with guilt, but with grace, because he knows failure is not final, it's formation. It's fuel, it's the sharpening tool of destiny, and he uses it. Every setback becomes a setup for something greater. That's the man who doesn't break, not because he's never been tested, but because he never surrendered to the test. He faced it, he endured it, and he came out stronger. That's resilience, that's value. That's the kind of man who leaves a mark, the kind of man who sets a standard, the kind of man who raises the bar just by walking into the room. And as he keeps walking, through storms, through fire, through seasons of delay and disappointment, he keeps his eyes on the bigger picture. He knows he was made for more than comfort. He was made for impact, and impact requires weight, and weight requires strength, and strength requires sacrifice, so he sacrifices. He lets go of what's easy so he can embrace what's eternal. He wakes up with purpose. He moves with precision. He speaks with authority. He gives with generosity. He leads with humility. He loves with intentionality. That's the blueprint. That's the standard. That's the example. And when people ask, how does he do it? How does he keep going? How does he stay strong? The answer is simple. He made a decision not to break, a decision to become everything he was created to be, a decision to stand, to lead, to build, to protect, to elevate, not for applause, not for fame, but because it's who he is. And when that kind of man walks the earth, he doesn't just live. He transforms. He leaves every place better. He lifts every voice higher. He builds not just a legacy, but a future worth fighting for. And no matter what comes against him, no matter what tries to knock him down, he rises. Every time, stronger, sharper, wiser, because a high-value man doesn't break. He becomes unbreakable. So when it's all said and done, remember this. A high-value man isn't defined by the world around him. He defines the world around him. He's not a product of pressure. He's the force that overcomes it. He doesn't wait for permission to rise. He rises because it's who he is. He doesn't shatter under fire. He becomes the fire, and when life tests him, when everything shakes, when silence falls and the lights go out, he stands. Not because he's perfect, not because he's never bled, but because he made a choice to live with discipline, to lead with integrity, to walk with honor, and to finish strong. He's not here to blend in. He's here to break cycles, shift generations, and leave a legacy of power, purpose, and unshakable identity. He doesn't break, he builds, and the world gets better because he chose to be that man.